A day after the president and the first lady called for Jimmy Kimmel to be fired by ABC for joking that Melania Trump looked like an expectant widow in a skit, Donald Trump's FCC is targeting the network's station licenses.
The initial inquiries were sent in March. They were just reported today, and it is the FCC's job to see what's happening on the airwaves. I just think from ABC's vantage point, it's extremely inconsistent. They've had no issue firing Roseanne Barr in 2 seconds. She tried to apologize. They said no way. They fired Chris Harrison from The Bachelor because he said, should we fire somebody and get rid of her for going to a party when she was a teen? And I'd like to remind people, too, I mean, when Obama was president, there was literally a clown at a rodeo in Missouri who made a joke about Obama getting gored by a bull. He got fired. So unless it's Trump, we have a very high standard for what we expect of entertainment employees and what we expect in terms of being respectful to the president. And I would remind people as well, you know, there was another assassination attempt at the Hilton, obviously against Ronald Reagan the last time. And after that incident, the country was so shaken. Johnny Carson, who was a Democrat, decided to postpone the Oscars because he thought it would be inappropriate to be celebrating and cheering when there was such an act of political violence. And you juxtapose that with Jimmy Kimmel, who continues to double down and ridicule and make fun of Melania. It would have been so easy for him to say, I screwed up, I apologize, and take some responsibility. And instead, he just wants to continue to victim blame Donald Trump for getting shot at. Seriously?
Although in this particular case, Kimmel would have had to have some prior knowledge of what was going to happen in this case to have something to apologize for.
Right, but the timing was unfortunate enough that he might as well have said, you know what?
I'm not sure.
That was unfortunate timing. I wish that hadn't been said.
I suppose one could say that, but he also made a joke on Thursday. The bad thing that we are all alluding to here happened on Saturday. The two are not connected in any meaningful sense. And again, what you said earlier is worth repeating. The several attacks that have happened directed at Donald Trump are egregious. It's shaken me quite a bit, honestly, to think that in the United States, in the year of our Lord 2026, people are taking shots at the president. And this is disconcerting. At the same time, it doesn't seem appropriate to me that the response from the administration is, well, let's start cracking down on everyone who is saying anything directed at the president, even if it has no connection whatsoever to an assassination plot. That, to me, again, smacks of pettiness. It seems vindictive. And again, it runs afoul of our laws. If there is a legitimate concern about systematic discrimination on the part of broadcasters here, the FCC would pretty much have grounds to go after every broadcaster in America related to DEI policies.
Including, by the way, Fox, which has DEI policies.
Absolutely.
Just like all the other networks. Yeah. But anyway,
so
Ellie.
Private entities have the right to fire people if they want, if they don't like that person's speech. But the real fundamental question here has to do with governmental power. Do we want the FCC policing the content of speech? Because that's a totally different thing. The First Amendment applies to governmental action. It doesn't apply directly to ABC. And so if the FCC is throwing its governmental weight around to try to influence speech, to try to punish certain speech, that is where the First Amendment is violated.
Punish, throw your weight around, going back to the first segment. When you talk about regulation, if the biggest thing that's changed since Ronald Reagan's horrible assassination attempt at that same hotel, and we were talking about it in the break, is the internet. Things now on the internet make us want to hate each other because we're team red or team blue because it makes people literally rich.
For a while, it seemed that the free speech argument was the argument being made on the right by people like Elon Musk, by people like J.D. Vance, who last year went to Europe and lectured them about protecting free speech. Listen.
In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat. So I come here today not just with an observation, but with an offer. And just as the Biden administration seemed desperate to silence people for speaking their minds, so the Trump administration will do precisely the opposite, and I hope that we can work together on that. In Washington, there is a new sheriff in town, and under Donald Trump's leadership, we may disagree with your views, but we will fight to defend your right to offer it in the public square.
Unless you are a late-night comedian, Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert, or frankly anybody who criticizes President Trump, they won't defend your right to say things they disagree with then.
Well, the president's not prosecuting, Jimmy Kimmel. He's saying he should be fired, and that could be his opinion. If you joked about someone's death, which he believed he did, Go ahead,
Using
criticize
the
him.
government
No,
doesn't necessarily
So
mean
he's using the
prosecution.
government to
It can
bring
be
something that they brought in March of 2025. They started this in March of 2025.
You can use the government's
But they started this
regulatory
in March of
power.
2025.
I'm not talking just about this, because don't forget,
That was the lead.
Brandon Carr made this threat first last fall. So the threat of using the government's regulatory power to police speech and police the actions of private corporations, that has been unequivocally put on the table. And I'm not the hold on a second. I am not the only
letter is about the DEI policies.
I am not the only
of
person
Disney.
saying that. Here's Ted Cruz today. He says, "It is not the government's job to censor. I do not believe the FCC should operate as the speech police." Ted Cruz.
Where-
he is no
I would ask you
Trump
and Ted Cruz.
hater. He's no rhino.
Where in Chairman
He believes that
Where in
this
Chairman
action,
Carr's letter-
and he was consistent. The last action, the last comments by Brendan Carr, he was very clear that he believed that that was a clear evidence of jawboning, which is using the threat to coerce speech. So it doesn't require that you throw somebody in jail. Just the threat of using regulatory power to coerce their
Nobody's getting
actions
threatened.
is what
Just
is
to be clear,
happening.
the FCC is not threatening to throw anybody in jail. It's not
So
what they
are
do.
you denying that Brendan
Let me
Carr
speak.
did not issue
No,
a threat in the fall to ABC or to Disney that they
Chairman
would
Carr's
review?
letter in March 2025
Joe,
was
simple
about
question. Did Brendan
I'm answering
Carr
it.
in the fall say that he would take a look at Disney's FCC licenses because of the comments that Jimmy Kimmel made?
I don't remember, but I can tell you what he's
Well, I
put in
can tell
writing.
you. I can
what
tell
he put in
you.
writing.
Hold on a second. I can tell you. He did say that. So, given that he said that, do you acknowledge that that's him using his power as a government entity to try to coerce the actions of a private company?
You are trying to stretch something that is on paper that you can read with your own eyes and see. The chairman's letter involves Disney's DEI policies, which the FCC has been regulating equal employment practices since something like 1968 or 1969. Every time a license gets renewed, they have to apply the same standards to everybody. And one of those standards is employment practices. If Disney has,
I mean, it's a good question. Why aren't they applying
nothing,
this standard across the board?
Well, when
why
they
are
get their
they
license renewed, they will.
Well, hold on.
But if Disney has nothing to hide about
Hold
their
on a second.
employment practices,
Expedited
why
the
not
No,
just go
process.
through
Disney's
you?
licenses are not up for renewal.
They're
They're
up
not.
in 2028.
Yeah, but
expedited the
they
process.
are
If I
not
can,
up for
the
renewal
way
right now.
we are talking about this at this table, all of us, exposes that this is a pretext piled atop another pretext. We all know this is not about DEI policies. We're not even really talking about it this way. We know it's about the content of speech. We know it's about the jokes Jimmy Kimmel made. We know it's about the kind of things that he says. That's what's prompting all of this.
I would have made it about DEI. I got interrupted 20 times.
Which broadcaster
We don't really believe it. Yeah.
hasn't made commitments to do this
Disney
kind of
has a
DEI
policy that
hiring?
50%
Joe,
of their
do you know
characters
any
and producers
broadcaster
have
that
to be
hasn't done this?
Underrepresented groups.
Do you know
That's
of
a
any
DEI policy.
broadcaster that hasn't made similar commitments since 2020?
No, and when their licenses get renewed, I imagine
But the license
FCC
isn't up for
I
renewal.
imagine
What we
the FCC
know is that
gonna
the
apply
process
same
was
thing.
actually expedited here. In fact, it seems as though they've expedited the process in the last couple of days. Why do you suspect that happened?
The process began in
I'm inviting
March
you
of
to speculate.
2025. It was done over the last year. You pointed out something that happened in the fall. So this has been ongoing for
I'm
over
asking
a
you
year
why
now.
they're expediting now.
I'm just telling you that there is a ongoing inquiry by the FCC.
I
And if
understand.
Disney has nothing to hide about their DEI policies,
The answer is not convenient.
I don't
for you.
think it's.
If they have
I don't
nothing to
think
hide,
it's.
just go through the
I don't
review.
think it's in good faith to suggest that things that happened in recent history that were big stories at the time didn't happen. They happened, right? We know that Brendan Carr's threats to Disney that was the big story, and he was crystal clear about it. Even Republicans had to rebuke him, and that's why they ultimately backed down, and they put Jimmy Kimmel back on the air. So we can't pretend like that didn't happen. We can't pretend that that's not the context. We also can't pretend that the context isn't that Trump has specifically asked and told ABC that they should take Kimmel off the air. So all of that, Joe, I mean, if you're being honest.
You're forgetting that Disney has
Joe,
been
hold on.
in the
If you're
bullseye of the
being-
Republican Party
if you are-
since Ron
hold on a
DeSantis
second.
5 years ago.
If
I mean, this
you
is
are
not
being-
a company that
but
the
if you're
Republicans
being
have shied away
honest-
from attacking.
If you're being honest, I think my final question to you is just sort of like in the last segment when we were talking about this. Do you really believe that this is the proper use of the federal government? You are a conservative.
The
okay?
FCC
JD
regulates
Vance said, we will protect your right to
licenses.
say things we don't like. Is it the right use of the government for the FCC chairman to threaten a private company over speech that the president doesn't
The
like?
FCC chairman put in writing a question about the DEI policies, which they have jurisdiction to oversee. If Disney does not have anything to hide about the DEI policies, go through the
What
review
about
and comply.
his?
Disney? By the way,
what
Disney
about
has said
Carr's-
we're going to comply.
Okay, all right,
Disney has
all
said
right.
we're going to comply. You're
Stipulated.
right, Chairman.
What
we're
about
going to comply.
what about Carr's threats in the
comply.
fall? Good use of.
I don't remember.
his-
I honestly don't
Okay,
remember.
well, I'm
Yeah.
telling you that it happened. Good use of his time or bad use of his time?
Maybe a bad
Good use of
It
the
doesn't-
government.
It doesn't
or-
preclude the fact.
I'm just asking.
It doesn't interfere.
Listen, Joe. All I'm getting at is honesty. That's all I'm getting.
I'm
at.
quoting from a letter.
Hold on a second.
stringing
All
things
I'm
together.
getting at is, can we be honest brokers at this table? Can we call a spade a spade? If you're a conservative and you have fundamental beliefs about the role of government, about free speech, can you apply those even when you like the president? Can you?
Conservatives are in favor of applying equal employment laws to companies.
And this looks like selective enforcement because
So I
every
think
single broadcaster has these
So I think
DEI policies.
we know that what the answer to that question is.